Welcome to the Christian Media Marketing Show. My name is John. Thanks for spending some time with me this week. Whether you are watching the show on YouTube or you are listening to it on the podcast, I hope that it will be a blessing to you. And in today's episode, I really just want to spend some time looking at some biblical examples and also some practical implementation of a mindset that I think determines a lot of what we might call success in ministry. And it is the Lord who ultimately determines success. But there are personalities that you and I have where sometimes we might look at a situation and maybe you keep going and I just want to hang it up. Or maybe I want to keep having grit and persistence and you're like, nope, forget it. Let's stop or let's change. Or when should we change? And when should we just stay the course and keep doing what we're doing? When is the result? When is the win? When is the success just around the corner? And when is it never going to come? How do we determine that? How do we know what's the right thing to do, especially when we face hard situations? We face some of those at Kavanaugh Media. We are a business's mission, and we're actually in the process of transitioning, donating the business and transitioning over to becoming a nonprofit so that we can fulfill what our mission is, so that we can see success for what we believe the Lord has given to us, which is to be that marketing and technical arm for as many mission organizations and mission teams and local people all around the world. And this is dependent upon the Lord. And so how do you determine when it is that the Lord is giving you the don't stop, keep going, versus sometimes when the Lord is saying, here is how I'm trying to stop you. Here is where the end is. Because I think sometimes in ministry and just things in life, we believe that the Lord starts it or whatever, but maybe he sometimes ends it as well. Maybe there are seasons to things. Maybe there is, as the scriptures tell us, a beginning and an end, a birth and death, that there are times to things. And yet I see many churches and sometimes ministries that are really on just life support. They died a long time ago, but they still have financial resources or whatever to keep operating. But are they succeeding? Are they accomplishing the mission? That's the ultimate thing, is what is your mission? And are you accomplishing it? And does the Lord need you and I for a while? And then maybe he has somebody else or something else in play. And so these are just things to work through. And we're going to look at the difference between being persistent and being stubborn. And I think there is a difference there, both biblically and even just in the work that we do. So let's dive into some of the material now and see what I think are some of the differences and some of the things that we can do to grow our spiritual persistence. All right. So the question is, are you determined or are you stubborn? Are you being persistent or are you being obstinate? What is the driving factor behind you, your ministry, behind myself and my ministry as well? And this is not meant to be something that's just semantical or something that, a difference of words in English. It's meant to be something more to the heart, to the spirit, to what it is that we're doing. And I know culture plays a part in this as well. But when you look at yourself, your ministry, your overall objectives, persistence itself involves a determination to achieve a goal, your mission, while being flexible and having to adapt. And if you've served overseas, you understand that requirement. Nothing goes as planned. Sometimes, though, being stubborn or obstinate implies this just stubborn refusal to change. Like you're just not willing. Well, I'm not going to change my approach. I'm not going to change my viewpoint. It doesn't matter what the information says or what I see. If it confirms or denies what I believe, I'm just going to keep pressing forward. And persistence, well, it's usually viewed in a positive, in a growth mindset, while being obstinate and stubborn many times is more what some would call a fixed mindset. And so how do we grow this? Well, there's different people in the scriptures who had one determined or stubborn in the way that they approach things. And I think as we look back on Scripture, we see these differences between them. So when you're looking at biblical examples of persistence, of what I would call a snapping turtle, they're just going to grab hold, they're not going to let go, they're pursuing their mission. Well, Job is one. He endured immense suffering. But what he was determined to do was to continue to follow the Lord. His faith was steadfast, and that's another word that we could use here. It was rock solid. It didn't waver. He endured that, but he remained steadfast in his faith. Paul is another one. Paul faced so many hardships, so many people going against him, so many times where I think it would have been easy to go, oh, forget this, and just wipe your hands of this people, this situation. And there are times of that, of shaking the dust off of people's sandals and moving forward. But Paul persistently moved forward with the goal of his life, with the mission of his life, which was spreading the gospel. And even though he had to change, and even though he had to move, and he had to seek refuge and all sorts of things, his success, his mission to spread the gospel never wavered. So he was persistent. Or even Nehemiah, there was unbelievable opposition to him going back, significant risks that he faced, even talking to the king all the way through, then going back, and the resistance that was there to rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem itself. And yet, even though there was significant opposition, he succeeded in his mission. He was persistent. He didn't stop. He had to adjust. He had people carrying a sword in one hand and a tool in another. He had all sorts of stuff going on, but he kept moving forward. Well, that's persistence, but what about being stubborn or obstinate? Well, Pharaoh is a good example of that. Over and over, he was told, do this, don't do this, and he repeatedly refused to let the Israelites go, despite all of the plagues, despite overwhelming evidence that he was doing things wrong, being told he was by spiritual people, all sorts of stuff, all of the plagues. No, he refused. He refused, and he was stubborn. He was stiff-necked, is another way that the Scripture would describe it. King Saul was one as well. He disobeyed God's commands. God told him to do something. He didn't do it. He acted according to his own judgment. And this is a key thing here I want us to kind of lean in, because in your digital engagement, or even just in your overall ministry efforts, there is things that are scriptural, and then there are things that are just, well, they're things that we do or things that we see. There are things that are from God, and there are things that are from man. Don't confuse those. And make sure that your decision-making is in accordance to what God has said. Search those scriptures. Jonah was another one. He was told what to do. He refused to obey God's command. In fact, even in the book, it says there in Jonah in the 4th chapter, it doesn't even end well for him. The Lord shows grace to the people. He tells them, Jonah, finally to repent, and they do, and he's mad about that. This is this hard, stubborn, obstinate heart. And even though the Lord was speaking to all 3 of these people, they wouldn't listen, and they wouldn't obey. So how can you and I, in our digital engagement, in really just our missions and ministry efforts, be persistent, but not obstinate? Well, let me give you 10 or 11 things here of how I believe we can continue to develop persistence in our ministry lives. And the first one is just seek the Lord. Seek the Lord and his wisdom. Not the world's wisdom, but his wisdom. And then journal what you hear. This is one of the things when we've gone through tough times as a family, in ministry, in Kavanaugh, whatever it might be, I continue to come back to my journals of what did I write? What did I hear from the Lord? What was he saying? Has he changed that? Has he told me something different? Has he released us from a mission or a job? Has he said, you're done, you've completed it, or there's a new thing? Seek the Lord and seek his vision and wisdom. Seek what he wants to do in and through you and through your ministry. Another thing is to just set then clear goals. When you know what that vision is, when you know what you're moving towards, set very clear, specific, and measurable goals. Where do you want to be? Where do you want things to be? How can you tell if you're on the right path? Your goals should be telling you that. And so know where you're going and then set some clear goals. They don't have to be change the whole world tomorrow. Many times they're going to be very small, very, very small things, but make them measurable and make them moving towards what your mission itself is. Another thing is then to develop a strong why. I think this is critical. Simon Sinek talks about this and he's written about it. There's a TED talk on it, but understanding the why behind what you're doing. What is the deeper biblical reason behind your goals? Is it just to raise a name, raise a brand, raise some money? Is it to lift up Jesus, to bring glory to him, to see his kingdom come? Is your goals developed behind your why? Because that really needs to be driving. Why do we exist? Individually, as a family, as a ministry, as an organization? Why? Why should we continue to do this? Why do we do this? And understanding that deep sense of why built upon your biblical principles. Another thing that you can do is create then a plan. When you're trying to be persistent, it's good to have a plan. Kind of like weight loss. If you say, well, I just want to lose weight, but then you don't have a plan, it's not going to work. And just having a goal doesn't work. Oh, I'm going to lose weight. Well, you probably know as well as I do how many people make plans in January about weight loss. And then, well, by the end of January, yeah, it's not going so much anymore. So create a detailed plan outlining steps needed to achieve your God-given vision. What needs to happen, and then what needs to happen next. Not jumps, not leaps, but steps, micro steps maybe. But create a plan and then use it. Plan your work and then work your plan. All right? The next thing that you can do is then stay faithful. You've made the plan, you're working the plan. Cultivate a positive and faithful attitude and focus on solutions while you trust the Lord. When bad things happen or things have to change or what we hoped or had planned on doesn't come about, it's okay. The Lord is still in control. God is still in control. The worst thing in the world is not for me to cease to exist or for Kavanaugh to cease to exist. The worst thing in the world is to be unfaithful to the Lord. The worst thing in the world is to be on our knees before the Lord someday and have him say, I gave you this and you didn't do it. Depart from me, you wicked servant. That's the worst thing. And so stay faithful, stay aligned, keep that purpose, that vision there, but be positive. The Lord is still in control. There's so many things happening that it is easy to get wrapped up into the negatives. I know it. I feel it. I've been there. It's easy to feel that stress of it. But God is still in control. He is still on the throne. And so remind yourself of that. Keep that faith going. Build then resilience. And the way you do this is you can view failures as learning opportunities. I've said this for many years now. You will either win in your digital engagement, your ads will either work, or you can learn. Don't view it as a loss. View it as a learning opportunity. And when you approach it like that, then we can learn from mistakes and we don't have to make the same ones. And so keep learning because this will help you to make new mistakes, not the same ones over and over. In fact, this will help you. It's like when you're weightlifting or doing, I used to do triathlons, the longer I would do certain things, the more my body would get used to them. That's building resilience. So view failures or breakdowns as learning opportunities there. Also, just maintain discipline through it all. If you can have a plan, then make sure that you are implementing on it each and every day. Have consistent effort. Don't just run ads every once in a while, but have a consistent effort to developing new ads, to running your ads, to analyzing them, to seeing what changes you want to do. The same thing with your language learning and cultural learning and anything else involved in your ministry work. Maintain discipline. This is one of the key things that I think helps determine success many times, is not that we make big leaps and bounds, but each day we're being obedient in that same straight objective and path that the Lord has given to us. And so develop discipline. It may mean that you have to change stuff. It may mean things like you have to go to bed at a different hour. You have to do this thing or go take this class or whatever it might be, but maintain discipline. Don't stop moving forward. Seek then support from others. Maybe you have a friend, a mentor, a spiritual director, a person that's going to really lean in and ask you very tough spiritual questions. Maybe a coach. There are business and ministry coaches out there. The key here is someone who will hold you accountable. Because left to ourselves, it's the very rare person who will keep pushing forward even when they keep getting knocked down without somebody else being there to support them and to help them. Sometimes ask the hard questions, but to be that person that's there to guide them and walk alongside of them. So seek that support. As you're doing this, this is one I think we miss sometimes in ministry, but stay healthy. Stay healthy. Watch what you're eating. Get good rest. Make sure that you are managing the stress, because when these waves keep hitting you, if you don't, you're going to get burnt out, you're going to get knocked down, and it's going to get harder and harder to keep pressing forward. We are spiritual beings, but we're also physical and emotional as well. And all of those things need to be in alignment in ways that honor God. So be practicing that. Watch what you're doing. I know of so many, myself included, who let ourselves go at times for this almost martyr syndrome of, well, I'm just not going to sleep, or I'm going to do this or whatever else. Well, that doesn't accomplish what the Lord wants. Yes, there may be times where we actually have to be martyrs, where we will have to stand for our faith. But there's only one person whose death seals success in ministry, and that's Jesus. He's the one who died and rose again. So stay healthy, stay focused in all that you're doing. And then reflect and adjust, right? So be looking at what you're doing and then adjust as you're moving forward. You don't get in a sailboat and just go, okay, raise the sail and here we go. Here's our one path forward. You have to constantly be adjusting the sails, the rudder, the direction. And sometimes to get from point A to point B, you've got to go at an angle because you're facing a straight headwind. Well, that won't work in sailing, and it doesn't work in ministry as well. So adjustments sometimes are really necessary. Finally, I will say this: stay committed. Keep your long-term vision in mind. What did God call you to do? Then evaluate everything through that. Evaluate your ads, evaluate your materials, evaluate your media, your language, your culture, your ministry, your discipleship, your leadership development, the full missionary task. Look at it in light of your long-term vision. And then understand that there will be waves, there will be challenges, but what has God called you to do? What has He called you to be faithful to? Keep that vision in mind. Don't stop pressing forward towards what it is that He's called you to do, and even more importantly, to be in Him as we become more and more like Jesus every day. All right, so there you go. There's some, at least my ideas about ways how you can continue to be persistent in what God is calling you to do instead of being resistant to what it is, His vision for you, for your family, for your team and ministry. And so I hope that, as always, it will be a benefit and encouragement to you. And yes, you're going to face resistance. And yes, spiritual warfare is very real. Satan doesn't want you to succeed at what you're trying to do to make Jesus famous. But my prayer for you and my hope for you is that you'll just keep pressing forward, always looking as to the seasons of what God is doing, being willing to turn the page and start new chapters if that's God's will. But the thread of all of it should be God's glory and bringing Him honor and glory in all you do every day in your personal life, in your family, and in your ministry as well. So may this be an encouragement to you this week as you continue to make Jesus famous. I look forward to seeing you next week, Lord willing. Until then, take care and God bless.